It's me, Vicky Marie. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in this crazy world we're living in. So, how are you all? I hope you're all well. My name's Vicky Marie. For anyone who doesn't know me, if you're maybe new to this channel, there'll be a little bit of waffle before we get on with the talking about things we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about three things, of course. We're going to talk about, first of all, we're going to talk about the very sad news that Ozzy Osbourne has died, and love him or loathe him, he is a character, a British character born in Birmingham in the UK. Certainly had a varied life, and to be honest, I think he's had a longer life than you might have expected from for the lifestyle that he had, especially when he was young. You know, his battle with drugs, etc. You know, rock and roll lifestyle. Ozzy lived the rock and roll lifestyle to the full. You know, he's a heavy metal performer. Of course, he was in Black Sabbath, wasn't he? Not my cup of tea music-wise, really. But obviously he is iconic. And then he gained fame later on in life from different people for the reality show that he did with his wife Sharon Osbourne and the kids, etc. And then, of course, he did give up drugs. And then he very sadly was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, and he's been quite poorly. But having said that, he lived to quite a ripe old age. He was 76. For someone who's had the lifestyle he's had, it's a surprise really that he got that far. But he was quite poorly in the last, you know, in the end of his life. But he did a concert not that long ago. It was like his farewell concert, wasn't he? Wasn't it? And anyway, he did it, and you know, it is sad, even though, as I say, he's not really, you know, there's a lot of things. I think I made a mistake years ago reading Sharon's book about Ozzy, and it just put me right off him, to be honest. But I feel for Sharon, and I feel for his kids. Sharon Osbourne seemed to just adore him. It was like nothing he did, whatever he did, it was nothing. He could do no wrong in Sharon's eyes. So we're going to talk about him a little bit and pay a little tribute to him. I know a lot of people did like him, thought he was great, and he's, you know, he's got something about him. I don't know what it is. As I say, passed through quite a bad time, if you like, or in his life. But as life went on, he seemed to sort of mellow, I suppose. Anyway, we're going to look at that. Then we're going to have a look at the Lionesses. This is just special interest to anyone who's English. This is the English women's football team, the Lionesses, who are in the Euros. They won the Euros last time. They are the reigning champions for the women's Euros, and so far in the competition, they've kept us all on the edge of our seats. They haven't had one easy game. Every game has been a breathtaking. You know, if you had a bad heart, if you didn't have a bad heart before you started watching the Lionesses, you certainly had one after you watched their last few games. We're going to talk about that. And then finally, we are going to talk about someone we haven't spoken about for a little while, a few days. Good old Erin Patterson, the Lady Macbeth of Australia, the poisoner, the triple murderer. And I found a very good video that I want to show you and react to from the Daily Mail. The reporter on the Daily Mail, I'll be giving him credit. I've given him credit already in the description for this video. Yeah, the evidence box. What convicted Erin? God, you might as well ask, to be honest, what didn't convict Erin? Because when you put all the evidence together for Erin, like not one thing was probably a smoking gun in itself, but you added them up together. It wasn't a smoking gun, it was a smoking cannon for convicting Erin. And I think this report of the Daily Mail, it does put it all very well. So we're going to watch that video. So first of all, of course, I want to say thank you to everyone. Thank you for watching. Thank you for liking. Thank you for subscribing. Special thank you to my members who are the mainstay of my channel. Thank you so much. Oh, and thank you to people who've bought merch. My merch is on my Ko-fi page. Thank you to those who've bought this channel a coffee or super sticker or PayPal'd me or sent a nice email, left a nice comment. Thank you to all of you that positively support this channel, and what a lovely community we've built here, and I'm very proud of it, and I'm very proud of you all for helping me to create this community that we've got. Okay, so I'm going to take off the banner. I'm going to say hello. Take the banner off. So it's 27 degrees here in Spain, in mainland Spain, in Europe. That's where I'm based. I'm originally from Manchester in the UK. I've got viewers from all over the world, I know that. So hi, lovely lurkers. In fact, big kisses today, big kisses. Thank you. Thank you for watching. Hi, loathsome lurkers. Hi to replay crew. I love you so much. And now I'm going to come in the chat and have a chat with those, say hello to those of you who are brave enough to venture into the chat. Okay, let's have a look. So there's a lot of chatting being going on. Thank you for participating. Thank you. Hi, Paul. Were you worried because I was a bit late? Do you know what? I was a little bit late. I had to have yet another shower. Do you know how many showers I had yesterday? At least 6 cold showers. That's how hot it is. Hi, Bluebell. Hi, Annie. Yes, the concert seems very appropriate now. Do you think that was deliberate? Do you think he did that concert knowing, you know, one of the videos we're going to watch, if I can find it, of course, I've got everything lined up, but, you know, things tend to disappear. You know, he knew he didn't have long for this world. Hi, Heather. Hi, Yvonne. Did I say hello to Empol? Hi, Empol. I think I did. Is it a weird house, Heather? I can imagine that it would be a weird house. Yeah, I never watched. So, of course, yeah, they did the Osbournes, didn't they? He's sort of credited with being, you know, the creator of reality TV, which, you know, I personally, I can't stand reality TV, but there you go. So I never watched the Osbournes ever. Just because they call it reality TV, but of course it's not reality, is it? Because the cameras are there. So it won't be, you know, they call it reality, but the cameras are there and people know the cameras are there. But I know a lot of people did enjoy it and saw a different side of him. You know, to me, he'll always be the guy from the book, reading that book that Sharon wrote about him. Let me put his picture up actually while I'm talking about him. The book that Sharon wrote about him, it didn't, you know, it didn't endear to him at all, because what she was saying about him, because I suppose, you know, when they first got married, you know, he was in his drugs years, like, you know, and he was totally either off his face on drugs or drunk constantly. He did horrible things, you know, apart from biting the head off the bat, which I think is a terrible, you know, just you know, just to me, that's nothing but animal cruelty. But having said that, I did notice that there was, what's the word, a eulogy or an acknowledgement of his death put on by PETA, PETA, saying how kind he'd been to animals, especially cats. So, you know, it was just the you know, I suppose it was just what he was, you know, at that time. I don't know, but you know, I just never liked him because of then she, as I say, other things that Sharon said. I mean, he cheated on her millions of times, and Sharon was one of those women in this book that I read. She was like, oh well, you know, I forgave him because it's just what he needed at the time, you know. And oh, you know, and I remember thinking, for fuck's sake, this man has treated you like a piece of shit, you know, and just, but they stayed together, didn't they? So she forgave him all his indiscretions. She said, it's just what he needed. It's just what he needed. And then there was one horrible story that she told that she seemed to find was funny. This is what I mean. This is not my sense of humour. So one night in a hotel, he was so drunk or high or probably a combination of both. Some poor unfortunate person had left their shoes outside the hotel room to be cleaned, and Ozzy did Erin Patterson in one of them. You know, did a poo in this poor person's shoe that they'd left outside. She thought it was hilarious, like, oh, it's so funny, a prank. You know, sorry, that's not my idea of a prank. So I remember reading that book and thinking, don't like this person. So that probably since then, I've never really taken any notice of what they're doing because I just thought, ugh, you know, just horrible. But anyway, you know, I know he was under addiction then, but it was the fact she found it really funny as well, I think, that did it. But the one thing I do think is that Sharon just adored Ozzy, wasn't it? It was like whatever he did, you know, it was like he couldn't do any wrong in her eyes. Makes you wonder, you know, if he would have become a serial killer, would she be one of those people in denial? Oh, no, couldn't possibly be my Ozzy. He likes cats. You know, it's so anyway, and but I know a lot of people loved him, so I'm not trying to be horrible about him. I'm just telling you my experiences and why perhaps I'm not enthusiastic about him. As I tell you what, imagine getting up in the morning and there's your shoes there, someone's taken a dump in them, you know, or I don't know. But anyway, it's a very interesting book, having said that. I can't remember what it was called, but it was, you know, Sharon's story of her and Ozzy. And, you know, it was an interesting book, but just don't think it was a good idea, really, because it certainly didn't endear him to me or her, to be honest. So, right, let me just see if I've missed anyone coming in. Hi, Geordie. Yeah, a lot of people. My brother, my younger brother, he's not younger than me, but I've got two brothers. One's unfortunately passed away, the older one. But the one that's only a couple of years older than me, he loved heavy metal and he listened to all these. I like a little bit of heavy metal. It's just not my genre. You know, I'm a new romantic, you know, but each to their own. Hi, Daniel. You know, each their own. We all like different. Their dogs would poop everywhere in the house. I've got a thing about poop, obviously. Hi, David. Yeah, Sharon. I worry about Sharon because she hasn't looked that well lately, as she. She lost so much weight. You know, she's a bit older than him, isn't she? She's a little bit older than him, I think. So he was 76, so she'd be around about 80, will she? But she lost a lot of weight. Yeah, he says he didn't realise it was real. I don't know if I believe that. And then afterwards, they made a big publicity thing of it, you know, selling bats that you could buy with the removable heads and things. And, you know, and the thing is, how many people will have really bitten a head off a bat? Because that's what people do. They're stupid, especially, you know, to follow Ozzy, especially if they're drugged out of their head or high as a kite on alcohol or either one, or maybe a combination. You know, sometimes I think I'd like to see some iconic people who have a positive influence on young people. Do you know what I mean? Not like a bad influence. But anyway, you know, that's what he did. The music, he was a big figure, wasn't he, in heavy metal music, if you like, that sort of thing. So you can't take, I'm not trying to take away from him. He was iconic. And he was a working class lad from Birmingham, who did well, but I don't think he would have done quite as well if he didn't have Sharon behind him. I think Sharon was the force behind him, wasn't she? That's how it seemed to me anyway. But so what we're going to look at. So we're going to look at a couple of things about Ozzy. Let's see. Right, let's have a look at this YouTube video first. So I need to give these people credit. This is Evo Data. And this was done 6 months ago. So this is, before, and it's a very interesting video because it shows his age evolution from 6 to 76. And I think if anything would ever put you off drugs, I've said it before, people who take drugs, they do not age well. Ozzy, I hadn't realised actually how handsome he was. When he was young, he was absolutely drop-dead gorgeous, wasn't he? When he was young. But I wouldn't say he aged that well, did he? The drugs took a toll on him. Of course, he got Parkinson's disease as well. Right, I'm going to turn. YouTube doesn't like music. But, so there he is at 6. Oh, look at that. Butter wouldn't melt. So he didn't. It's ironic, really, isn't it? When you, look at this little 6-year-old boy, just, normal lad from Birmingham, didn't know that he was going to become one of the most iconic rock stars ever, and reality TV star. Wonder what his parents thought about it all. I expect they went through hell with him when he was a teenager. So you've got him at 6 there, then 10. Then 10, then at 20. Now this picture of him at 20. Will you shush? This picture of him at 20, he looks a little bit like Mark Bolan there. That's probably the hairstyle of the time. Of course, Mark Bolan, he was another one, wasn't he, that came to a bit of a sticky end. But he died young, of course. Whereas, Ozzy has had a long life. For someone who had the life he's had, he's done well. Really, to live as long as he has, hasn't he? I think. But he was gorgeous, wasn't he? Definitely very, very handsome man. Let's have a look. Right here at 21. Look, I mean, just so gorgeous. Here, 22. I hadn't realised he'd been so good looking. 23, 24. I think, the trouble is the drugs get a bit of a hold of you, don't they? That's a nice picture, 26 there. I've got to say, most of these pictures, if somebody would have showed them me, I wouldn't have even known it was him. I wouldn't have said, because I didn't know anything about him when he was young. 1974, I was, very young then, so I didn't really take any notice of Ozzy Osbourne at the time. I was more interested in David Cassidy. Bay City Rollers. Yeah, you can see the drugs are starting to get him, and he's only 28 there, but I don't know, his face has changed, I think, already. Yeah. Now, he's 31, I think, when he married, 31, 32, something, when he married Sharon. I think he was very lucky to meet Sharon. This is about the time he married Sharon when he was 33. He had his hair like that on the wedding photos. I think he was very lucky to meet Sharon, and she probably rescued him quite a few times. Oh dear, see, look at 36. I mean, you know, the difference in him. It's a shame, isn't it, actually? And of course, he tried to strangle Sharon on one occasion. You know, he was that high. Huh. Yeah. Okay, look at the hair there. That is that like in the the 80s. I was going to say with the 80s hair. They all look like different people, don't they? Doesn't look like the same person. Yeah, and then by the time he was 43, he really was starting to look, you know, not too clever. I'm not sure how old he was when he gave up drugs and alcohol. He gave up everything, did he? I don't know. Some of you out there might know more than me about that. I haven't really followed him. Um, Sort of looks better there at 49 than he did on those other pictures. That's quite nice. Yeah, looks sort of healthier there. He's smiling as well. There's a lot there, and then he looks terrible on that one. Weird. So he received the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He won the Godlike Genius Award. It's a shame, is it? Because you know what? It doesn't matter who you are, how famous you are, how popular you are. Age takes its toll, doesn't it? Age takes its toll, and illness, of course. So, not sure when he was diagnosed with Parkinson's, but he really was quite ill by the time he died. He couldn't really walk very well, could he? He was in a wheelchair for his world tour, wasn't he? I don't know if it was a world tour. For his final concert, he had to sit in a chair, didn't he? He couldn't stand. God, I hope nobody ever puts something like this together for me, because it's quite depressing, isn't it? Oh yeah, there's some like here. He looks okay. Looks quite healthy, and then I suppose it depends on the photo. I mean, he's 70 on that photo, and he looks okay. I think also. Um, Okay, no. Obviously, you know, I think it's better to carry a bit of weight. I know I keep saying this, but like Sharon, for example, his wife, she was a bit more chubbier, wasn't she, when she was younger? And as she's got older, she's gone very, very thin. I don't think it's not good as you get older. Honestly, I do feel. I know I keep using it as an excuse to have another bag of chips or whatever, but it's true. And also, I think because when you're older, if you get ill, you tend to lose a lot of weight, don't you? Well, if you're already very slender, you've got no weight to lose. You've got to carry a little bit of weight just in case you get ill. That's what I think. And yeah, he did look very poorly just before he died. Yeah. Now, as I say, this was done 6 months ago, so before he died. But it's interesting, isn't it, to look at how he changed over the years. Let me put that down. But yeah, so terribly handsome when he was young, I think. Very, very handsome when she was young. When he was young, I think. Okay, let's have a look at another video I wanted to look at. I've got a few videos set up. So this is a video that where he talked about dying. Okay, so it's interesting because he was aware of his mortality, of course. You know, we all know that it's going to happen to us one day. We hope. So Rod Stewart has left a tribute for him, and he said, "I'll see you up there later rather than sooner." Yeah, we all hope it'll be later rather than sooner, don't we? I think Rod Stewart looks healthier, doesn't he? You think about Rod Stewart and how he looks, even at his, because he's quite elderly now. But you know what? He's aged well, hasn't he?
No need for a doctor to tell me. That farewell performance was something I insisted on doing. I don't want to disappear silently. I have to say goodbye in person.
Oh.
I thought spinal surgery could save me, but it turned out to be even worse. The combination of nerve damage, infection, and Parkinson's disease crushed me. During the 3 months after the surgery, I was almost a useless person, and even flipping over hurt like a knife. Nowadays, people have to push wheelchairs wherever they go. I regret having that surgery, but no one told me at the time that keeping it as it is might be better. It's not those doctors who keep me alive, but Sharon, that woman who supported my messy life.
Oh, it's not the doctors that's kept me alive, it's Sharon, the woman that supported my messy life. And she has, hasn't she? God knows how she feels. I worry about her because, as I say, I don't think she looks that well. Hasn't looked well for quite a while, I think. So it's probably the strain of looking after Ozzy. And she won't know what to do when she hasn't got Ozzy to look after. Because really her whole life from when they got married, she's been taking care of him, hasn't she? She's, one way or another. Oh, what happened there?
She knew how terrible I was when I was young. She should have dumped me countless times, but never left. I can't sing anymore, but this time I have to stand on the stage, even if I'm sitting. I want everyone to see, no matter how weak my body is, the Dark Prince is still here, alive. I'm dying. It's a fact. There's no need for a doctor to tell me. That farewell performance was something I insisted on doing. I don't want to disappear silently. I have to say goodbye in person. I thought...
He's always wearing quite a lot of crosses, so I don't know if he found God in later life or if he's always been, believing that, or if it's just his look.
Spinal surgery could save me, but it turned out to be even worse. The combination of nerve damage, infection, and Parkinson's disease crushed me. During the 3 months after the surgery, I was almost a useless person, and even flipping over hurt like a knife. Nowadays, people have to push wheelchairs wherever they go. I regret having that surgery, but no one told me at the time that keeping it as it is might be better. It's not those doctors who keep me alive, but Sharon, that woman who supported my messy life. She knew how terrible I was when I was young. She should have dumped me countless times, but never left. I can't sing anymore, but this time I have to stand on the stage, even if I'm sitting. I want everyone to see, no matter how weak my body is, the Dark Prince is still here, alive. I'm dying. It's a fact.
So that was an interview he did shortly before he died. I've got some more videos to show you. Let me turn that down. Now, I've got Donny Osmond's tribute here somewhere. There it is. So, yeah, Donny Osmond. So when I was young, you either like David Cassidy or Donny Osmond. I was a David Cassidy. I think Donny Osmond was just too nice, if you like, for me. I think Donny Osmond has got better looking as he's got older, to be honest. And of course, David Cassidy, he was another one. He was consumed by alcoholism. You know, it's hard. It's rare for famous people, especially in the music industry and stuff like that. They quite often seem to go off the rails, don't they? And of course, David Cassidy was married several times. He didn't have a Sharon behind him. I could have been his Sharon if only he would have asked. I would have looked. No, I wouldn't. I haven't got the patience of Sharon. But anyway, Donny Osmond's tribute that he put up on X was this advert that he did with Ozzy. Him and Marie, his sister, did with Ozzy years ago, and it was really funny, I thought. But anyway, let's see.
Stupid bloody
Dad.
bag. No, I'm just
But we really want to show you something.
Oh, what is it then? What is it?
These aren't Pepsis. They're Pepsi Twists.
You're a bunch of bloody magicians.
We're not the
Is it just me, or does Ozzy? Ozzy always reminds me of Kevin the Teenager. You know, Harry Enfield, that character. He always reminds me of him. So these are the kids. When is it Jack and oh gosh, I can't remember her name. It will come to me. Yeah,
Osbourne.
You're not?
We're the Osmonds.
I'm a little bit country.
I'm a little bit rock and roll.
I dreamt the kids turned into the husband.
Oh, there, dear.
Like twists, Pepsi Twist and Diet Pepsi Twist. It's a twist on a great thing.
Stupid bloody
Dad.
bag. No, I'm just
But we really
saying.
want to show you something.
Oh, what is it then? What is it?
These aren't Pepsis. They're Pepsi Twists.
You're a bunch of bloody magicians.
We're not the Osbournes.
You're not?
We're the Osmonds.
I'm a little bit country.
I'm a little bit rock and roll.
I dreamt the kids turned into the husband.
Oh, there, dear.
Like twists, Pepsi Twist and Diet Pepsi.
So Donny Osmond said, remembering my brother in music, Ozzy Osbourne. I mean, they couldn't get more different, could they? Donny Osmond and Ozzy Osbourne. You know, there's Donny Osmond. He's like the all-American Mormon family. You know, there was nothing dark in the Osmonds. And he calls him his brother in music. It's sweet, isn't it? I've always looked back at this commercial we shot in 2003 so fondly. The last time we spoke was backstage of Dancing with the Stars season 9, when he told me how much he loved the Osmond song Crazy Horses. Talk about crazy. You wouldn't think he'd love an Osmond song, would you? Thank you for always bringing your authentic personality to everything you've touched. From crazy horses to crazy trains. Rest in peace. That's lovely, isn't it? I think that's a lovely tribute. Anyway. Yeah. Couldn't get more different than Donny Osmond and Ozzy Osbourne, could you? Oh, my God. Now then, I've got one more, I think, that I want to show you. If I can find it, of course. Yeah, here it is. Oh, it's disappeared. God, when you try and save something on Facebook, it doesn't, like, save properly. Let's have a look, see if I can find it. It's just an age progression thing of Ozzy. Yeah. I mean, he's all over the internet, obviously, at the moment. So, right, I found it. So let me share it. Just what it's one of those, you know, when I watch them quite a lot on TikTok. They show somebody, you know, over the years. They normally start with the older version of them. And it says, I am 81 years old, but once I was. And then it goes backwards, and there's one for Ozzy. So that's what we're going to watch. Just to finish off with this story, I mean, I've got the other stories to talk about. Right, hang on, let me make it bigger. Right. I can't put the music on because YouTube doesn't like that. Let's just start right from the beginning. Sad, isn't it, to see how you sort of, we all end up that way one way or another. We just never know when it's going to happen. So he certainly received a lot of accolades. The star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. You know, you can see he was handsome. I think really up to his late 40s, perhaps. That's when it all went wrong. So this is when they got married. He was blonde there, wasn't he? And look at Sharon. Every time Sharon was looking at him, you could just see she's absolutely besotted by him. She always was. She's forgiven him. You know, she would definitely be one of those women that he could turn up with a bloody knife. He's murdered 20 people and she'd clean it and hide it from him and give him an alibi because she just loves him that much. I mean, this is where he's so handsome. 21 years old, but I wouldn't recognize him. That, you know, he doesn't you know, he doesn't look like the same person, does he? Bless him. But he's like so handsome, sexy. Oops. Oh, I wouldn't see that. So look, that was him at 19. We'll watch that one more time. Rest in peace, Ozzy. I hope his family are okay. At least he got to do his final concert. Makes you wonder if he wouldn't have gone down the drugs route, you know. Oh, I say he lived it's a long life. He lived a year longer than my dad, who never took a drug in his life, though he did smoke when he was younger. Huh. So handsome there, isn't he? I mean, really, really handsome. And there. This is him at his last concert, of course, and he couldn't move out the chair. I think he had to be strapped to the chair, to be honest. So, but, you know, people turned up for it. People wanted to see him. I think there's a lot of fondness out there for him, isn't there? So he's left a legacy on the world. That's all you can do. Yeah, 21, Geordie. Absolutely drop dead gorgeous, isn't it? Wasn't he? You know, no wonder Sharon loved him so much. I mean, I don't think it was just because of the way he looked. Sharon's like a motherly type person, isn't he? Someone like Ozzy. She just, I don't know, she must have loved him to have put up with what she put up from him, you know, and to stick together with him. So anyway, bless. So rest in peace, Ozzy. And I hope his family are coping okay. And yeah, he left a legacy on the world. I think it's a good legacy in general. I think people will forget about the bad things like the bat and pooing in someone's shoe in a hotel. because they'll remember him more from the reality show. And yeah, I think he was quite a nice person, basically, inside, you know, what he did as far as the back was concerned and what have you. He obviously was, you know, under the influence and that. So poor Bat, though. I want to say a little RIP to the Bat as well. So that's Ozzy. I wanted to talk about him first of all. A British icon at the end of the day, and he got famous over the pond as well. And yeah, God, and he was loved by his family, you know, as well. So regardless of what he did, not only Sharon but his kids and everything, he was loved. And you know, you can't ask for more than that, really. Be loved by your family, be successful in your career, leave a positive influence on the world. And I think whenever anyone thinks of Ozzy, they will smile, even me, although I'm not a massive fan of his. It does make you smile. But okay, talking of making us smile, well, it made me smile anyway. I just wanted to, before we talk about Erin, because of course we're going to talk about the mushroom murders and the evidence against Erin Patterson, I just want to talk just a little bit, because I know it's only English people who'll be interested in this, I suppose, or maybe people who like football. The Lionesses in these Euros, oh my God, they're giving me heart attacks. All the matches that they're playing, they've won, they're in the final on Sunday, but oh my God, they're like knife edges, penalty shootouts. Then last night, again, extra time. You know, they conceded a goal sort of early on, and all the way through the match, we were right into the last seconds of the match. Now, I'd like to say I feel sorry for Italy. I don't believe in this. I don't think, you know, it's a game, it's football. How many times have England got right to the last minute and lost for whatever reason? I don't feel sorry for these teams. That's what they do. They lost. They should have played better. That's what I say. And, you know, you can't feel sorry for them, because if they didn't lose, we would have lost. So, you know, and they wouldn't have cried over England, would they? So, yeah, it was all in the last couple of minutes. And then this girl, I think that's her, isn't it? The one who scored the equaliser. She is only 19 years old. And she scored an equaliser, and then we went into extra time. And then again, Chloe Kelly, who always comes to, this is Chloe Kelly here. Can't remember this girl's name. I'll find it in a minute when we go into. She scored the first, like the equaliser, and then in extra time again, right at the end of extra time. So we didn't have to go to penalties. Chloe Kelly, who's always a hero for England. Now, she's a Manchester City player. And, you know, Manchester City is my team, men and women's team. But she's not been playing very well for Manchester City. In fact, they may have even transferred her by now. I'm not sure. She wasn't playing very well. And so she was dropped from the team, etc. Well, she came through again, because she was the one who scored the winning goal for the Euros, the last Euros. So the last Euros that we're the reigning champions. It was only 3 years ago, because I think that had been held back, hadn't it, by COVID. So normally it's every 4 years, but it's only 3 years that have gone past since the last one. And it was Chloe Kelly who scored the winning goal. And I don't know if you remember, she took her top off and was swinging it round. She just had her training bra on, you know, and that was the picture on all the newspapers the following morning. Well, she came through with a penalty. I mean, it was a clear penalty. The person from the Italian team was obviously frustrated, tired, whatever, you know, pushed her over in the penalty box. So it's going to be a penalty all day long. You know, it had to be a penalty. I don't think there was any doubt about it. And Chloe took the penalty, and the goalkeeper saved it. but Chloe just swooped in and pushed it past the goalkeeper into the goal. So she scored on the rebound from the goalkeeper saving it. It was a brilliant match. I mean, if you like football, I think the ladies' football is so entertaining to watch. I don't know, it seems more entertaining than the men's football somehow. I think it's because they just get on with it. You know, they're not bloody rolling around injured all the time or making a big drama out of everything. I just find it's really exciting to watch. So I've got a little hang on. I had a little video about that prepared, but of course that's disappeared. I'll find it. It's just Sky News, what they had to say about it. Yeah, very interesting games, very exciting games. Oh, look, they're talking about the girl. Let's have a look. So she was a ball girl. This girl, the 19-year-old who scored the equaliser, you know, that meant that we could go to extra time. She was a ball girl just a couple of years ago. You know, she's only just really started playing what you might call proper football. She's 19 years old. Let's have a look at this video about her.
Ahora contrata la luz con Iberdrola y te llevas 200 euros para gastarte en experiencias inolvidables.
It was almost arrivederci England. It was an Italian job. They'd opened the gate to let everyone out. The match was over. Italy had won. But no, Rob, no, that didn't happen at all. It was the teenage super sub that saved England again.
Michelle Adjaman, she scored the equaliser in the quarter-final, took them into extra time that day. And what a moment again. 6th minute of stoppage time. She's only been on the pitch 11 minutes.
I know, just so cool, so calm, so brave, so strong. My goodness, why didn't they bring her on sooner? And then Chloe Kelly, the absolute super sub card, who'd come on quite late as well.
Just when we thought there'd be a penalty shootout.
When we thought there was going to be a penalty shootout. I mean, she came in and did what...
Yeah, I thought, oh God, it's going to be a penalty shootout. Again, I don't think my nerves can take it. It's bad enough watching the men with penalty shootouts, because in the last penalty shootout, they weren't very good, to be honest. Neither team. You know, they missed more penalties than they scored. But anyway, they came through and they won. So we're all thinking, oh my God, there's going to be another penalty shootout. And then Chloe Kelly, it was a penalty. Of course, so it was a penalty shootout in a way, but anyway, she put it in the back of the net. What was I going to say then? So, oh God, yeah. When you know what, I find the coverage so frustrating. What is it about English commentators? They always feel like they have to be fair to the other teams. I tell you what, if you watch Spain playing, you know, with a Spanish commentator, they don't give a shit about the other team. They don't say, oh, that's a shame that they missed that, or oh well, they played so well, they deserved this. No, it's just Spain, that's all that counts. You know, what used to drive me really mad, and I know I've got quite a lot of Scottish viewers and you won't mind me saying so, I'm sure, but when they used to have Alan Hansen on commentating, he was so down on England because you don't have anyone commentating who doesn't want the team to win. The only people should be commentating are people who want the team to win. I don't like watching Roy Keane commentating, not on international. I don't mind watching him, you know, when it's like the league and whatever. I love Roy Keane. He makes me laugh. I don't want to hear him say, because he's always just saying bad things about England anyway. Yeah, it should be English commentators who are just all about England and even saying, oh, that was brilliant when it wasn't. That's what the Spanish do. It's all encouragement for their team. Don't care about the other teams. They don't care if the other teams lose or they should have won or they should have done this. Or it doesn't matter. It's all about England. So that's Ian Wright is good for that. I do like to watch Ian Wright being a commentator because he's all for England. And the girl that was commentating last night, oh God, I can't remember her name. What she was good. Yeah, so all the ones that were in the studio were very much pro England, and the two that were commentating on the match, they were pro England, but they were trying to be too fair. Why do we have to be fair? It's only about England and England winning. That's all that counts. Doesn't matter about the that's a shame for what was it? It's a shame for Italy. Like, no, it isn't. No, it isn't. You think Italy would care about England if we lost? If it would have been us who would have lost.
She does. It's like, I'll have that ball. I'm going to take this penalty. Beth Mead won the penalty, by the way. But I mean, that was also quite tense because that didn't go according to plan either.
It was saved, but there she was to bury the rebound. 3 years on from her coming off the bench and scoring the Euros winner at Wembley against Germany. They're into another final.
Do you think she's wondering what she has to do to make the starting lineup, or she's just never going to make the starting lineup? She is the Ole Gunnar Solskjaer of this team.
Is it good to have a super sub? Fresh legs, that fighting spirit, the ability to come off the bench.
Yeah, she's a bit of a super. So Sabrina Wenger, our manager, she's a brilliant manager, isn't she? But she's been getting a little bit of criticism because she does wait quite a long time before she brings the subs on. But when she brings the subs on, it seems to work, or it's worked so far. It's just we've all got our hearts in our mouth because it's, literally near the end of full time. That was when they brought that girl on and she scored. It's like, oh my God, I was literally just thinking, oh, I'm going to bed in a minute. That's it. Next minute, oh, extra time. So she's a very good manager. We're lucky having her as a manager, I think. So they're in the finals. They're in the finals for Sunday. And they're defending, of course, their European, they won the Euro. They do a lot better than the male team. What have the male team ever won lately? They do well. They always get into the semi-finals, finals or whatever, but they just can't seem to win, can they? Like these Lionesses, they know how to win. And, Ian Wright said that, and it's so true that they might not, sometimes it might look like they're going to lose. It doesn't matter how they win. They've got to win. They know how to play tournaments. They don't ever give up, do they? They never give up. They're, still there. Sometimes when you watch England play, you just think, oh my God. The male team. So, yeah, they know how to win a tournament. They've already won one. And are they going to defend it and win the second big tournament? I hope so. So that'll be Sunday. Now, I think it's tonight. I'm in this weird position where I'm actually supporting Germany tonight. I would never normally support Germany. There's long-standing rivalry, isn't there, between England and Germany in the football. But I don't really want to play Spain on Sunday, not only because Spain are a really good team, of course, but, then I won't, I feel worse. Like if Spain lose, I would feel bad for Spain. Whereas if Germany lose on Sunday, I won't feel bad for them at all. So tonight, I'd quite like Germany to win. Now they're a funny team as well. They've made hard work of it so far through this tournament. But again, they're there, Whereas Spain, everyone's saying like they must be. I think we're favourites actually, but Spain must be second. They're a good team. Of course, the last time that Spain won something, there was all that fracas, wasn't there, about Rubiales kissing the girl on the lips, the captain on the lips, and he got sacked, and she's been sacked, actually. She hasn't been chosen for the team this time. But anyway, that's an aside. So who will win tonight? Will it be Germany or I'll be watching it. Germany and Spain's on tonight, I think. And then whoever wins that will go into the final to face England. So it's good, it's exciting.
And make a difference. Rather than starting, Serena Beaton's always got her to call on.
Honestly, you couldn't make this up. Our nerves are absolutely shredded.
Yeah.
But they will go through to play that final on Sunday. We don't know who they will face yet, Spain or Germany. They won't care. They were so close to going out, but they're through.
Yeah, they're a good team. I love hearing them talk afterwards. They always say nice things about each other, and they're a proper team. Now, it's been difficult for them because Sabrina Wenger, she has dropped a lot of the old faces from the last tournament. She's gone with a lot of the younger players, and I think Mary Earps, the goalkeeper, when she retired, but she retired because she wasn't going to be the first choice. And I love Mary Earps. Everybody did, it's like, oh, we'll never win it without Mary Earps. So that's how we felt. But the new goalkeeper, she's doing okay. So, but yeah, she had big boots to fill for Mary Earps. But anyway, she's filling them. So I just wanted to talk about that for all you English people out there who are interested in this Euros tournament. All looking forward to Sunday, big match, get the beers in, get the pizza, get the snacks. I think it's about 3:00 on Sunday. Can't wait to watch that. But anyway, we've got to see who we're facing yet, so I will be watching tonight. I will be watching... Sorry, I didn't mean to do that then. I meant to take off the little one. I will be watching tonight. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the third thing that we're going to talk about, which is, I'm going to put the picture of the victims up again. Erin Patterson. Now, I saw this video that the Daily Mail, True Crime, they put together this video of the evidence that convicted Erin. It's very interesting, so I'm going to react to it. I'm going to play it. I've give them credit in the description of this video. Very good video, very well put together, and the guy who has prepared it, I'm trying to find his name. Oh, where's his name? Yeah, this guy's called Guy Adams, and he's done like an evidence box. I don't know if he does it in general for crimes or whether he's just done it specially for this one. Let's just have a look at another few pictures of Erin, though he will be showing photos. There she is. I love them. I didn't hurt them. I love them. Obviously, she didn't. There's Erin. There's her true self showing right there in her face. If looks could kill, we'd all be dead now. Here's Ian, the only survivor, bless him. Oh, now he has returned to church to do a sermon, which is nice. And if we've got time at the end, I might show that because that's nice and positive. Good for him. So because he's a pastor, he's gone back to his services. Good for him for doing that. And of course, for anyone, if you've been on Mars for the last few weeks and you don't know about this case, Erin Patterson was the woman who killed 3 of her estranged husband. This is her estranged husband, Simon. Erin poisoned 4 of his relatives with death cap mushrooms, which are the really toxic mushrooms. She put them in a beef Wellington, invited them round to lunch, and they died. They died. And Erin had a little bit of diarrhea, she says, which I think that's been totally debunked really now, hasn't it? And, we had this very long trial. This is Erin's solicitor, Colin Mandy. Then we had the prosecutor, who was brilliant, Dr. Nanette Rogers. She had to pull it all together. She brought over 50 witnesses, one of which was Funky Tom, the mushroom expert. It was a very long, drawn-out, but interesting trial. This is Justice Beale. I think these are death cap mushrooms at the side of him. It was a very long trial, and the only witness called for the defense was Erin. herself. They called nobody. The prosecution called over 50 witnesses, and the defence only called Erin Patterson. She spoke for 3 days on the dock in her own defence, told lie after lie after lie. She was caught out in so many lies, wasn't she? And, you know, practically wore out my Pinocchio book. She wanted everyone to believe her, even though her lies were shown up, and he's going to talk about those. Now, this guy, he was actually there in the courtroom. Honestly, I would have, and he gives this interesting insight. I would have loved to have been there, because the thing is, you want to see Erin's, you know, we read about it, didn't we? Because the reporters were allowed to report on it, but we weren't allowed to see any video or anything. But this guy was actually there in the courtroom, and he gives very interesting insights, I think, about, you know, where Erin went wrong. I'm going to subscribe to that, actually. Oh, I am subscribed. Where Erin went wrong, the lies she told, that he was there and he heard the jury sort of sighing, you know, like, oh my God, you know, she's telling another lie. So, yeah, very interesting insight, this. So this is him with the evidence box. Let's have a look.
My name is Guy Adams, and this is Evidence Box. This is a trial a case that is predominantly about mushrooms, and here in the evidence bag we have a mushroom. In this trial, the type of mushrooms that were at the centre of the case did not look like this. The type of mushrooms was a variety known as the death cap. You can see it here. Now, there's a reason the person in that picture is wearing a blue glove, and that's because death cap mushrooms are incredibly poisonous. In fact, during the case, we heard from a number of mushroom experts. This is a very important one in the context of the trial.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting as well. It made me think after I've seen this. So anybody who was handling death cap mushrooms, they were wearing gloves. So Erin's supposed to have just took them out of her Tupperware box and put them in the sauce for the beef Wellington, and she's supposed to have tasted it, because he says that she said when she tasted the sauce, the paste, they've got a special name for it that I can't remember, she thought, oh, it lacked something. So then she remembered these mushrooms that she had in a Tupperware box, and supposedly she took them out of the Tupperware box, presumably without gloves on, added them to the sauce she was making, and she must have tasted it again. You know, if you taste something, like say you're making a bolognese or anything, and you taste it and you think, oh, it's lacking something, maybe it needs a little bit more salt, a little bit more pepper, a little bit more tomatoes, whatever, a little bit more stock. So you put more of whatever you think it's lacking in. Obviously going to taste it again, aren't you? So is Erin really seriously saying that she tasted this sauce, it was lacking something, so she put in these mushrooms and then she didn't taste it again? You know, she could have, I don't know about you when I'm making sauces, and, you know, I like tasting. You know, that's the whole point, the cooking part of it, isn't it? Making a bolognese, you have a little spoonful of it, don't you? You know, a little bit more red wine in there, or a little bit more salt, or whatever. You know, that's what you do. You taste things as you go. When you're cooking at home, I mean, you're not in a bloody restaurant where you're probably not supposed to taste things. But, you know, when you're at home and you're cooking something, of course you taste it. So she's supposed, she's trying to say that she just plucked out these death cap mushrooms from a Tupperware box, put them in there, you know, and everybody else is handling them like the bloody kryptonite or something. But oh no, not Erin.
trial. He's a man called Tom May. His nickname is Funky Tom. Now, he appeared in the witness box and told us exactly what happens if a human being ends up eating one of these mushrooms. And basically, over the course of about a week, all of your vital organs shut down and you are likely to eventually die. Your liver is probably the first thing and most important thing to go. Erin Patterson lived in Victoria, a state in southern Australia. She lived in a rural town called Lionesses about...
Oh, what did that say? Arrive alive, take a break. They should... Sorry, I missed
He's
that.
a man called Tom May in southern Australia. She lived in a rural...
Lionesses, arrive alive, take a break. Oh, God. Oh, dear me. That's ironic, isn't it? Arrive alive. You know, as long as you don't eat any beef Wellington prepared by Erin Patterson. Yeah, so it attacks your liver. These mushrooms attack your liver. Poor Heather, Ian's wife, her liver was completely dead. And she was so ill, she couldn't be given a transplant. Whereas Erin had a little bit diarrhea, if you even believe that, of course.
A town called Lionesses.
Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt. But, you know, the more I now read about this, the more ludicrous the whole thing sounds. What Erin was expecting people to believe. It's just, you know, and I'm going to prepare this video that I've got, I'm preparing at the moment. I'll finish it over the next couple of days. The myths about Erin Patterson. One, that she's intelligent. She's not intelligent, because anyone who's intelligent would never think they could get away with this. She's not intelligent.
About 2 hours drive southeast of Melbourne. Now, in that part of the world, death cap mushrooms tend to grow in the autumn, which is in the months of April and May, when it's starting to get rainy. And they're quite rare, but they pop up underneath oak trees. Now, the prosecution's case was that Erin Patterson deliberately sought out these quite rare and highly poisonous mushrooms in order to feed them to her guests at a lunch that took place in July 2023. The defence's case was that she definitely did feed her guests death cap mushrooms.
Now, the only thing I don't like about this video is they keep changing the camera angles. I'm not sure why. Why can't we just look at him and he's talking to the camera? Why do they keep changing it so he's just looking? Where is he even looking? Has he done this himself or what? Anyway, I don't know. I don't like that style. Just look. I like to look at someone's eyes. It's same with all the YouTube channels that I watch. You know, it's like I like to see people's faces full on.
That day, but that this was an accident. The defence argued that Erin foraged for mushrooms, it was a sort of hobby, and that the whole thing was a terrible mistake, and she inadvertently thought that a mushroom that looks like that was edible, much like a mushroom that looks like this ought to be. Item number 2.
Having said that, I don't like YouTubers who go right in your face. You know, like some of them you watch and it's like they're literally nose to nose. I don't like that either. I think that's very aggressive.
The murder weapon. Coming back to that beef Wellington. Now, for those of you who don't know, the beef Wellington, I'd describe it as a staple dinner party dish. It's a whole fillet of beef wrapped in pastry and then baked in the oven. But importantly, and you'll see, I'm just about to pull it apart, in between the beef and the pastry, there is a layer of something called duxelle, which is a kind of reduced fried pate made out of mushrooms and garlic. And that is essentially how the poisonous mushrooms found their way into Erin Patterson's lunch. Now, at a normal dinner party, what you do is you slice your beef Wellington, and each guest will get a slice of beef Wellington on their plate, probably with a bit of gravy. On that fateful day in July 2023, Erin Patterson didn't actually make a beef Wellington. She made 5 of them. Each was a bit smaller than this one, and one individual beef Wellington was served to each of her 4 guests. Now, those 4 guests were all relatives of her estranged husband, Simon, with whom she had 2 children. They were Simon's parents, Don and Gail, his aunt Heather, and Heather's husband, Ian, who was the local church pastor. 3 of those 4 guests
are in the cemetery, yeah. And don't forget, of course, we know now that probably on at least 4 other occasions she had tried to kill Simon. Apparently she'd made him some sort of wrap thing, chicken wrap. She'd cooked him some cookies. What was the other thing? So, yeah, she tried to kill Simon. I think Simon was the intended target, but she was just so angry with him and his family. She's just such a nasty person, this woman.
Died. The 4th, Ian, he survived, but he had to spend about a month in hospital. And he gave evidence at the trial about what happened when they went to lunch that day. It was an agreed fact that the beef Wellington did contain death cap mushrooms. The question for the jury was how they got there. The prosecution, of course, said it was deliberate. She wanted to kill her guests. Erin Patterson said it was all a bit of an accident. And specifically, she says that when she was cooking that duxelle on the morning of the lunch, it was a Saturday, she was in her kitchen and she was sort of tasting the dish as she cooked it. And she decided that it wasn't quite mushroomy enough.
So apparently she's tasted it. It's not mushroomy enough. So she's gone and put in those other mushrooms. You're telling me she didn't taste it again? Of course she did.
Used a box of just normal mushrooms from Woolworths, the local supermarket. And she said that in order to make it taste a bit stronger, a bit more mushroomy, she'd use some dried mushrooms, something that, you know, the type that look a bit like this. And she said she kept a load of dried mushrooms in a Tupperware container in the cupboard in her kitchen. And we'll come back to this crucial bit of the evidence later. The next crucial bit of evidence involved plates. Now, when Ian Wilkinson gave evidence at the trial, he said that Erin Patterson had seemed a little odd on the day that they had the lunch. He said,
yeah, the plates are crucial, aren't they? The plates are, I've been obsessed by the plates right from the beginning. As soon as Ian said those plates, the colour of those plates, and those plates were no longer at Erin's. So, like, some people think that maybe she took them, because within half an hour of the lunch guests leaving, she was down the dump, wasn't she? Dumping a load of cardboard. And you couldn't see her dumping any plates, but people say maybe they were hidden somewhere and maybe it just wasn't captured on CCTV. Just seems strange, doesn't it, that just after you've had a nice lunch, would you really think to go to the dump after that? And also, don't forget, at some point she's supposed to have had 3 portions of bloody orange cake or whatever. So, yeah, but no, sometime in between, she got to the dump and dumped a lot of stuff, but we don't know what.
And she didn't really want anyone else to come into the kitchen. And when she served the dish for everyone, she put a beef Wellington on their plate. She put some green beans. She put some mashed potato. And in evidence that made me think she was probably a pretty bad cook, she ladled out some gravy that she'd sort of bought in a packet and poured that on top. Ian said that each of the guests was served by Erin on a particular type of plate. He said it was a grey plate. Now that's important because Erin, according to Ian, did not eat her lunch off the grey plate. Erin ate her lunch off a plate that looks something like this, although Ian actually said it was slightly smaller than the grey plates. This was crucial. The prosecution claimed that the reason Erin used colour-coded plates was that her beef Wellington was not poisonous, and that the ones she served her guests were poisonous. And the prosecution claimed that it was a sort of insurance tactic by Erin, a way of making sure that she didn't accidentally feed herself one of the 4 poisoned beef Wellingtons.
I mean, the thing is, Ian was such a convincing witness. He's clearly an honest man. And Erin, of course, had told all those other lies. So, obviously the jury were more likely to believe Ian. Why would he lie about the plates being different colours? And the other thing is, he actually had that conversation. Heather actually said, or was it Gail, said to Simon, oh, hasn't Erin got a full dinner service? Because people notice things like that, the differences between the plates. And also those grey plates were never, ever found. So that makes it all suspicious. But Erin said, no, he was mistaken.
Erin, when she gave evidence in her defence, actually claimed that Ian had got it wrong. She didn't call him a liar. He was quite a convincing witness in many ways, but she did say he was mistaken. She said she didn't own any grey plates and that she'd served everyone on completely different coloured plates, some black, some white, because she didn't actually own any that looked the same. It was one of the issues that the jury had to make a decision on and decide who was telling the truth. Another important piece of evidence, it involved the investigation into the lunch by the local public health authorities. When they realised that people had eaten death-packed mushrooms, their immediate concern was obviously to find out where on earth these had come from and to prevent anyone else from falling sick. So public health officials carried out a number of interviews with Erin. And that brings me to another piece of evidence. These are some shiitake mushrooms. They're dried Chinese mushrooms. Now, when Erin was asked by those public health officials,
they're my favourite mushrooms. They're so lovely, those.
Where she'd got the mushrooms that she used in her lunch from, she'd said they came from two places. She said some of them had come from the local Woolworths, fresh mushrooms, and she then claimed that some of them had been dried mushrooms that she'd bought from an Asian supermarket. That caused a bit of a panic amongst public health officials. Obviously, if an Asian supermarket's selling dried death cap mushrooms, lots and lots of people could be about to die. So they were very, very keen to find the source of these mushrooms. But Erin Patterson said she couldn't remember where that supermarket had been. There was no record on her bank statements or card statements of any point of sale.
Yeah, Erin with the terrible memory couldn't remember anything until, suddenly when Nanette Rogers said about a certain date and she said it was a certain day and Erin went, no, that was a Friday. Nothing wrong with Erin's memory. It was just a ruse.
Purchase in an Asian supermarket. Erin said, I must have paid cash. She gave a sort of rough neighbourhood. She couldn't quite remember. Public health officials went to a number of shops trying to find mushrooms with the sort of description Erin gave. They couldn't find them. And it was only in court that Erin changed this evidence somewhat. She said, yes, I did have a Tupperware container full of dried mushrooms from an Asian supermarket in my kitchen that was added to the duxelle as I was cooking. But, she said, I'd also put in that Tupperware container some of the mushrooms I'd foraged and then dried out. And they must have all got a bit mixed up, and that's how my guests were poisoned.
And don't forget, though, this is what she came up with at her trial. Originally, she told the police she'd never foraged for mushrooms. She never forages for mushrooms. She didn't have a dehydrator, all that. And now suddenly, for the trial, yes, I do forage for mushrooms. Must have just got mixed up.
I now want to talk about another piece of food, in this case, a cake, or more specifically, an orange cake. Now, the reason I want to do this is quite simple. A lot of the trial revolved around the question of how 3 of Erin's 4 guests died, and one of them very nearly died, when Erin didn't. Now, the prosecution's case, of course, as we know, is that Erin had made sure that her beef Wellington didn't have any death cap mushrooms in it. The defence's case was a little more convoluted. Now, Erin said she basically cleared things up. She went around the room and at some point she chanced upon an orange cake. It had been made by Heather Wilkinson, one of the guests. Because everyone's beef Wellington was quite large, not very much of this orange cake had been eaten. But Erin looked at it and says she suddenly felt quite hungry. Now, at this stage in her evidence, Erin told the jury something which she'd never told anyone in her life before. She said that she'd been struggling with body image issues from quite early on in her life, and that for most of the last 20 or 30 years, she'd actually been suffering from bulimia. And when she was...
Yeah, so bulimia, of course she's got bulimia. The thing is, we're bearing in mind, she's only just come out with this. She's never mentioned it to anyone. She's never been for counselling about it. She's on this whole pity party thing. Oh, feel sorry for me, I've got body image issues, I've got bulimia, blah, de, blah, de, blah, de, blah, de, blah. Clearly she hasn't, because she'd never, ever discussed it or mentioned it. Now, okay, maybe, people do keep these things secret. But, it's just obvious that it was a lie, another lie. And what she was trying to do was say that the reason she didn't get so ill as the others, because the dramatic difference. We're not talking about, that Erin got really ill, but she managed to survive like Ian did. She just never got really ill. All the others are so ill that they're in intensive care, put in comas. Ian survived by the skin of his teeth, and Erin's got a little bit of diarrhea. And she's trying to say that the reason for that is because she made herself sick with the orange cake. Also because obviously she's quite a big lady. She's maybe a bit more substantial than the others. Oh, and she took some Imodium. As if Imodium would help if you'd been eating death cap mushrooms. So she came out with all this crap reasons about why her symptoms weren't as severe as the others, but the difference was too much. Again, this is another contributing factor to why the jury just didn't believe her. Because, you might say, there were just nothing alike, the symptoms. Anyway, apparently it's because she threw up this orange cake.
Asked about this by her barrister, Colin Mandy. He said, well, how does this manifest itself? And like all bulimia, you eat too much of something and then you make yourself sick. Erin said that she saw this cake and she ate a slice of it. And then she was asked, what did you do next? And she said, well, I ate another slice and then another until I'd eaten the whole cake. At this point, Erin was asked what had happened after that. And she claimed that she then went to the bathroom and made herself sick. Now, it's the defence's case that in making herself sick, Erin must have vomited up quite a lot of that lunch and probably most of the beef Wellington. And that this explains why, although they claim she was a little bit sick, she wasn't as sick as the others. This brings me to the next item of evidence, some toilet roll and a poo bag. Now, we heard in court that all four of Erin's guests started to feel really ill on the Saturday night after the lunch. About 10 o'clock at night, they were vomiting, they had pretty severe diarrhea, and by the Sunday morning, all four of them, and remember they were quite elderly, they'd all been taken to hospital. Erin, in her evidence, claimed that she too was sick and that she too had started to suffer from diarrhea on the Saturday night, and that this was pretty severe and it continued for more than 24 hours. The defence was sceptical about this, and so we got into all sorts of quite grisly evidence about the details of Erin's diarrhea, the consistency of her poo, and there was one quite bizarre incident that was raked over several times in court when Erin had said that on the Sunday night, so 24 hours after the lunch, she'd driven her son to a flying lesson. He took flying lessons, and the flying school was about 90 minutes away. Now, the prosecution said, look, how did you drive 90 minutes when you had such explosive diarrhea that you claim to be going to the toilet every 20 minutes?
Yeah. We all know that if you've got a bad tummy, not even as bad as supposedly Erin's was, you don't leave the house because you would be absolutely mortified to get caught short somewhere outside of your own home. If you've got a bad tummy, you don't want to leave your own loo, do you? And the thing is, she didn't have to go. I mean, it's different if you've got to go to work or you've got to go here or you've got to go there or whatever, I don't know, something urgent. But this wasn't urgent. This was a flying lesson that her son could have done anytime. And not only that, it was bloody miles away. It was an hour and a half drive. It wasn't just like a 10-minute drive around the corner. So it's completely ludicrous to think that if you had, a really bad tummy that Erin claims she did, that you would go on that trip. Anyway, she claims she did. And although her son did not remember it, she claims she had to go and do what bears do in the woods.
And Erin said in her evidence that actually her diarrhea was so bad that she was forced to stop by the side of the road, waddle off into the bush and do what those of us who are into camping know as a wild poo. She said she then cleaned herself up with some wet wipes and toilet roll she had in the car and put them in a dog poo bag that she disposed of at a petrol station later in the journey. She also claimed to have gone to the toilet in the petrol station, although the CCTV from that petrol station showed that she was only in there for about 9 seconds. Erin's case was that she was very, very sick, and on the Monday morning she went to hospital. Having presented there, she then decided to pop home again. She said she had to deal with her animals. She had dogs, she had sheep at home. Then she returned to the hospital and they ran a number of tests. The doctors concluded once they'd run her blood.
Yeah, remember that. She stayed 5 minutes and then she said she had to sort her daughter's ballet bag out, sort the animals out, and then apparently she had to lie down, all after being told that she could be dead within a day. Crazy. The more you go back on this, the more you realise how bloody ludicrous it is.
Actually, she wasn't that ill, and she checked out of hospital on the Wednesday. And again, this was something the jury had to think about. They had to work out whether, as the defence said, Erin was sick, but not as sick as her guests, or whether, as the prosecution contended, she was making the whole thing up. The next item of evidence, medical records. Erin Patterson didn't usually entertain people at her house. It was very rare. And in fact, Ian and Heather Wilkinson had never been to her house. The reason she invited them to the lunch involved her medical condition that she claimed to have been suffering for some time. Now, Erin had told her relatives that she had found a lump on her elbow, and several weeks before the lunch that she'd gone to a local hospital where they performed a needle biopsy and a scan to try and work out what this lump was. She exchanged text messages with Gail, her mother-in-law, and in those text messages, Gail had asked her how the tests had gone, and Erin had said, "Not bad, but you know, there's a bit to unpack here, and I want to tell you all about it at the lunch we're going to have." She also exchanged text messages with her estranged husband, Simon, who she'd also invited to the lunch. Now, he decided not to go at the last minute. When he decided that the night before, Erin sent him a quite angry message saying, "Given the conditions, my medical conditions, this is likely to be the last chance I have to have an event like this for some time, and I'd really like you to attend." In court, it emerged, according to Ian Wilkinson, towards the end of the lunch, Erin had said she had an announcement to make, and she told her guests that she'd been diagnosed with cancer, specifically with ovarian cancer. When police began investigating the lunch, they of course pulled Erin's medical records, and they discovered in those medical records no evidence at all that she'd been suffering from cancer. She'd never been diagnosed with cancer. She'd never had tests on a lump on her elbow. She'd never had scans. There'd been no needle biopsy. The whole thing was a lie.
You know, for me, this is the very worst lie that Erin told, and she told so many lies, but to say that you've got cancer for sympathy, you know, there's people out there with cancer, you know, to make, it's a horrible thing to say. Take all the other things away, you know, say you've got, I don't know, bloody COVID or something, or say, she had to say she was like for maximum attention, maximum sympathy. And those people, they were nice, good, kind people. They prayed for her after she'd just murdered them. By the time they'd finished that lunch, they were dead people walking, and they didn't even know it. She knew it. As they were praying for her, she knew that they were going to die, or at the very least be seriously ill. What horrible, hateful woman. Sit there and watch them pray for her, laughing inside, smirking inside. She is the real evil of evils, in my opinion. Because those, as I say, those people, they were kind people, you know, and she just mocked their religious beliefs, didn't she, with her friends and everything. Just mocked them for being decent people, and sat there and let them pray for her, even though she knew they were like carrying their deaths in their bodies. Then she knew she'd killed them, and just watched them pray for her. I don't think you can get much more horrible than that. Better she would have shot them really than that. To do that, make them feel sorry for her. Honestly, I can't get over it sometimes.
Now, the prosecution's case is that Erin told this lie for a simple reason. They say she wanted to ensure that all of her guests came to the lunch because she was plotting to kill them all. Also, she wanted to make sure that her 2 children were not there and that it didn't seem odd that they weren't there. So the guests and the children were told that the grown-ups had to talk about grown-up stuff. The adults were told that we need to have a sort of proper conversation. Now, when Erin was asked about this, when she gave evidence, she said something very different. Erin said that she'd actually been suffering, as we know, from body image issues, and she was really concerned about her weight. And that sometime in 2023, she decided it was time to get gastric band surgery. Now, Erin claimed she'd actually booked in for this surgery. And because it's quite a major procedure, she knew that in the days after the operation, she was going to need a bit of help with childcare. She didn't really want to tell everyone that she was having gastric band surgery because she was, in her words, embarrassed about it. So she cooked up the story about having cancer as what you might call a sort of white.
She wasn't embarrassed about anything because she was the number one on the planet. But it's interesting when he talks about this because she mentioned it one day and it was the next day that the prosecution had gone away and done their homework and realised that place that she mentioned, the clinic she mentioned, they did not do that procedure there. So again, it comes back to that myth that Erin is intelligent. If she was intelligent, she would have given the name of a place that actually did do gastric bypass surgery, instead of talking about some place that didn't even do it. She's not clever. She is not clever.
It's a lie. Now, she was cross-examined about this by the prosecution barrister, Nanette Rogers, and asked, well, where was this gastric band surgery going to happen? Was it booked? In the witness box, Erin turned around and said, yes, I'd booked it for a day in September at a clinic in Melbourne called the Enrich Clinic. I was sitting in court at the time and I got my laptop out and I Googled the Enrich Clinic. I was fascinated by it. I'd never heard about it. It was a new piece of evidence. And it very soon became clear to me that this Enrich Clinic, it's a sort of cosmetic dermatology clinic. And I could find no evidence whatsoever that it performed gastric band surgery. Now, it looked...
Yeah, so she just said that. It's just what I mean. She's not clever, because if she was clever, she would have at least given the name of a clinic that did gastric band surgery. But yeah, so it's interesting what he says, because I think that he said this was like a pivotal point, because all the lies she told anyway, and I know she wasn't on trial for lying, and that's what the judge told them to remember, wasn't it? She's not on trial for lying, thank God, because they would have come back within 5 minutes with a verdict, wouldn't they? She wasn't on trial for lying, but I think I think that jury probably wanted to believe Erin. No one wants to believe that somebody could be that evil. I think it's in our nature not to want to believe that people could do something so terrible. But then another lie, and this is something she said that she'd never said before. Just suddenly she's just making it up as she goes along, really. So according to this guy, that was like a pivotal moment, and he was there. I wish I would have been there.
Looks like the prosecution did something very similar, because a day later, Nanette Rogers raised this issue and said they'd gone to the Enrich Clinic, they'd taken evidence from the people who ran it, and said to Erin Patterson, we've done our homework and we've discovered this place you said you were going to have gastric band surgery doesn't actually do gastric band surgery. Erin looked a bit surprised. She ummed and ahed. It wasn't a great moment for her in the witness box. She eventually said, maybe I was wrong, maybe I was, confused, maybe I meant liposuction, something like that. In addition to admitting to lying to her own family about having cancer, she was also lying to the jury in the room on that day. And I think that may very well have sealed her fate. The next thing to come out of the box is a tablet. Police raided Erin Patterson's home twice. During those searches, they seized a huge number of devices. And on those devices, they found some quite interesting material. First thing they found was a lot of messages that Erin had exchanged with Facebook friends. She was a member of a true crime forum. She became quite friendly with the members of that forum, and during lockdown they sort of splintered off into little groups, and they began talking about, their lives. Now, Erin Patterson, around this time, around sort of late 2022, had fallen out quite badly with Simon, her estranged husband. She and Simon separated in 2015. And for years, things had been pretty amicable. They'd shared sort of parenting duties. Their finances had been casually organised. Erin was actually quite a wealthy lady. She'd inherited an awful lot of money from her grandmother and then her mother, who died in around 2019. And she'd been very generous with the money. She'd loaned cash to members of Simon's family. At the end of 2022, Simon had put on his tax return that he was single. He'd previously been saying he was married, although they were living apart. And by saying he was single, Simon, which he said when he gave evidence, he sort of did accidentally, didn't really think about it. By saying that had severe implications for Erin and her tax status. And it meant that she couldn't claim certain tax breaks, and she was significantly poorer. And she was very upset about this. She contacted child support and said, look, if you're going to say, if you want to be single, we need to we need to organise our finances. And child support became involved, and they started arguing over who would pay the kids' medical fees, who would pay the school fees, how much money.
Yeah, it's all about control with Erin. She didn't like it when Simon said that without her permission. Do you know what I mean? It's like, as soon as she felt she was losing control, that's when it all went wrong. When she thought she was in control, Miss Moneybags Erin Patterson, doling out money to his relatives, being the queen bee of the whole family situation, she was fine. But once it all started, she started losing control. And I'll tell you what, if it comes out in the future that Simon had met someone else, I wouldn't be surprised. Because even though she didn't want him, I've seen it happen with people that I know. They don't want him, but they don't want anyone else to have him because they don't want a rival in their power thing. They don't want another woman getting involved, even though they don't want this man. They just do not want any rivalry to their complete control.
They should each have to live off, whose name should be on the deeds to all the properties they owned. And it became, for a time, quite a kind of heated argument. Their relationship deteriorated, and in late 2022, Erin had asked Simon's parents if they could get involved, maybe mediate. And Simon's parents had basically said, look, we don't feel comfortable doing that. All we can advise is that you two, work it out, maybe get together and pray together. And Erin had vented about this in considerable detail on some of these Facebook groups.
Do you imagine saying to Erin, because so she's trying to get them on her side, of course, and they weren't on anyone's side. They were just trying to be discreet, and they said, get together, pray, because that would be their answer to things, because they were religious people who believed in prayer. So for someone like Erin, who believes in absolutely nothing, although she kept pretending that she did, she doesn't believe in anything. She's an atheist. That would have just irritated her, because she's like, what do you mean? Pray. I'm the talk to me, support me. What do you mean pray? Even though at the end of the day, Simon was their relative. Not her. She was lucky that they even tried to support her a little bit, because there's plenty of in-laws out there wouldn't touch their in-law, if it was the husband or the wife, they blame them for everything. If it's not their relative, there's loads of them. So it seems like Dawn and Gail, etc., they were trying to be diplomatic, but, for her to tell someone like her to pray, she'd just think that was laughable.
So the messages they actually retrieved, messages she sent to her friends saying, I'm sick of this shit. I want nothing to do with them, meaning her in-laws. So fuck them. Another message says, this family, I swear to fucking God. In the context of the trial, this was important. The defence and Erin, right from the start of the case, had always maintained she loved her in-laws.
Yeah.
She was friendly to Simon.
Whatever.
She didn't want to harm him or his family. And she was very upset that they died. This was just, words she exchanged in the heat of the moment and should be seen in that context.
She couldn't even remember their names.
The prosecution's case, on the other hand, was that while she pretended to get on well with her in-laws, she actually really had fallen out with them quite badly, and that her real feelings towards her family, the ones that motivated the crime, were the feelings she expressed in these Facebook messages to her friends. The other important role that phones and tablets played in the trial involved triangulation evidence. So a mobile phone, when you use it, connects to a mobile phone mast. Your mobile phone, the one you carry around, is constantly searching for the best mast to get the best signal. So when you forensically examine them, experts are sometimes able to sort of work out where you were at any given moment. They can't do it with complete certainty. It doesn't quite work if you're underground or around hills or tall buildings. It can be a bit quirky, but they can draw a pretty good picture of where someone is and when. And using that evidence, they discovered that Erin Patterson had made 2 peculiar journeys to towns about half an hour, 45 minutes from Leongatha, where she lived. Those towns were called Loch and Outrim. And that's significant because, as I mentioned before, death cap mushrooms aren't very common in the state of Victoria. But Erin turned out, according to analysis of her computers, turned out to be a pretty avid user of an internet site called iNaturalist. Now, it's a sort of citizen science website where people log sightings of interesting plants. Sightings had been logged on iNaturalist of death cap mushrooms in those towns. One of the people who'd actually logged one of the sightings was Tom May, the mushroom expert, Funky Tom. That was his username on iNaturalist. He'd logged a sighting of mushrooms, and on that very day, or the day after, Erin Patterson went to the town where that sighting had been and spent about an hour there. The prosecution's case was that this showed that she was deliberately trying to pick death cap mushrooms. Erin's defence was that she might have gone to the town on that day. She couldn't really remember, but if she did, it was nothing to do with mushrooms. The other crucial piece of evidence involving devices revolves around a potential cover-up. Erin used a number of different mobile phones, and it emerged during the trial that although police had seized several of them, there was one, probably the one she used the most in the run-up to the lunch, that they never found. The handset they did seize, which had been one she'd used over the previous couple of years, Erin had managed to wipe. Specifically, during the time the police were searching the house, she turned to a detective and said, look, I've got my children, I need to arrange some childcare, my daughter needs picking up, do you mind if I go and make a call? And for whatever reason, the detective said fine, and she went off into another room in her house and she carried out a factory reset of her phone, completely wiped it. The prosecution's case was that this was important. This was evidence that Erin was orchestrating a cover-up because she knew she'd committed a crime and she thought there'd be evidence on her devices. Her defence was that, no, she'd simply panicked and, she was concerned, she was worried about the police searching her house, and it was the sort of thing someone does when they panic. The next piece of evidence is actually too big to fit into the box. It's down here, and it is a culinary device known as a food dehydrator. As I've mentioned, death cap mushrooms grow in Victoria in March or April.
Now, I have to say, that is nothing like Erin's dehydrator. Her dehydrator was black. I don't know if I've still got a picture of it up here, maybe not. But yeah, I mean, anyway, it doesn't have to look like no, it's not. So Erin's was more square, black. But anyway, so just to let you know, it doesn't look anything like the dehydrator Erin had. Well, when they finally realised she had one, of course.
And yet the lunch at which 3 of her guests died was in July. And as you and I both know, you can't stick a mushroom in the fridge and expect it to still be there in July. What Erin Patterson did, and in fact she did this on the very day that she travelled to Loch, She went to a local hardware store at the end of April and purchased a food dehydrator. The one she bought was made by a company called Sunbeam. And over the ensuing months, she seems to have become quite interested in dehydrating mushrooms. She would cut up mushrooms she'd bought from the supermarket and dry them out. She posted pictures to her Facebook group of herself drying out mushrooms. And she told her Facebook friends that actually what she was doing was that her children didn't really like mushrooms. She thought they were very nutritious, very good for you. And so she'd dry out these mushrooms, grind them into a powder and sprinkle the powder in her daughter's muffins. And this was a way of getting good nutrients into her daughter's otherwise poor diet. So here are two of the messages she sent about the mushroom dehydrator to her.
Now, as if you're trying to get vegetables into your kids, mushrooms would be what you would think of. You might think of broccoli or carrots or peas or any other veg. Would mushrooms really be the first vegetable you would think of trying to get down your kids? She is such a liar.
Facebook friends. So, fun fact, the dehydrator reduces mushroom mass by 90%. Do you think Woolies would mind if I bought the dehydrator into their vegetable section and dry things before I buy them? That's an Erin Patterson joke. The second message said...
He is funny, isn't he? It's like, oh, that's an Erin Patterson joke. He's like, Erin, she's so funny, isn't she? Apart from being intelligent, she's witty. Apparently her husband said that about her. Is that it? Is that a basis of a joke? Oh my God, I wonder if Woolies would mind if I took the mushroom. Oh, you can just imagine her saying it and thinking she's hilarious. Idiot. He says it so much less, he puts her over in a much more, calm manner than me. I get angry.
I've been hiding powdered mushrooms in everything. Mixed it into the chocolate brownies yesterday. The kids had no idea. The jury was actually shown images that...
Do you know what? You just think them kids have had a lucky escape. I tell you, there come a day she'll be putting something else in their chocolate brownies or whatever when they start going out of her control. This is what I just keep thinking about Erin. When she had to start coping with teenagers, older teenagers, young adults who are going to be, refusing to do what she asks them to do and, being perhaps even horrible to her. Because, unfortunately, kids are like that sometimes. God, they'd end up with a different kind of mushroom in their chocolate brownies then, wouldn't they? I wouldn't trust her around anybody.
They'd found on Erin's Samsung tablet of her food dehydrator with mushrooms in it. And actually the shelves of the dehydrator with mushrooms in them, they had scales on. She seemed to be weighing them. And they were taken, I think, in early May 2023. Now, those photographs were shown to Tom May, Funky Tom, the mushroom expert. And looking at the mushrooms in those pictures, he's...
Funky Tom. Yeah, I agree, Angel. Now, the thing is, Erin will have used her money to buy people's, control over people. As I say, I've known many people like that. You think they're doing you a favour, and you think, oh, that's kind of them, offering to pay that or... I don't know, lend you some money when you're really desperate, and there's always a price to pay with these kind of people. Seems okay, and then it's almost like a deal with the devil, and you don't see it at first. It's like, oh, I'll help you with that. You just pay me back when you can, blah, 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 and then... you realise what that means is till that's paid back, they own your soul. That's how I think Erin is.
Said I think his words were a high degree of certainty that the mushrooms Erin was drying out that day were death cap mushrooms. Now, the prosecution's case, given that there were scales, was that Erin was sort of weighing out a lethal dose of these mushrooms, which she was then going to grind into powder. The prosecution was of the view and wanted the jury to be of the view that Erin had ground these mushrooms down into powder and that she'd used the powder as a sort of concentrated poison Much like she'd been able to sprinkle field mushrooms, dried field mushrooms, into her daughter's brownies, she could also sprinkle dried death cap mushrooms into her guests' beef Wellingtons. The prosecution claimed that when she put dried mushrooms in her children's food, Erin was sort of practicing for the murder she intended to carry out several months later. Although it's slightly unclear how these found their way into the beef Wellingtons, Erin did talk a bit about making the beef Wellingtons, and she said in court that she'd been unable to buy a whole beef fillet in the Woolworths in her town, as it happens, and so she'd instead bought sort of slices of beef fillet sort of wrapped in plastic. She'd bought 6 of them, I think, in total. The prosecution pointed out that they thought this was a bit unlikely, that she'd had to adapt the recipe in the recipe book she used because she'd not been able to find a whole beef Wellington. The prosecution said, well, why didn't you just go to the local butchers? Why didn't you shop around? Why didn't you try and find an entire beef fillet? Erin never really came up with a convincing argument for that either.
How could you not find an entire beef fillet? I mean, it's not only their lies, they're ridiculous lies. Again, she's not intelligent. Not really. She's cunning, she's malevolent, she's malicious, she's sinister, but she is not intelligent. She thinks she is, and other people think she is because she's told them she is, probably for so long, but she literally is not.
It's one of the small things that helped seal her fate. Erin Patterson stayed in hospital until the Wednesday of the week after the lunch, and then they discharged her. She was fine. Everyone else was getting very sick indeed. They'd been transferred to hospitals in Melbourne, and 3 of the 4 people who had been at her lunch would die in hospital. And this brings me to my final piece of evidence. Well, this is a CCTV tape, a videotape. After being released from hospital or discharged from hospital on the Wednesday after the lunch, one of the very first things that Erin Patterson did, and it's an odd thing, is that she went to her local tip. And at that local tip, she took the food dehydrator that had been used, as we know, to dehydrate death cap mushrooms, and she disposed of it at the local tip. And the jury was shown CCTV of her doing that. The prosecution claimed, of course, that this was a weird attempt by Erin to cover up evidence, that the food dehydrator was a crucial piece of evidence that would prove that she'd poisoned her guests, and she wanted to get rid of it. And in her defense, Erin came up with a different claim. Erin said that while she'd been in hospital, she'd had a long conversation with her estranged husband, Simon, and during that conversation, they'd started talking about mushrooms, and actually started talking about dehydrated mushrooms and powdered mushrooms that she'd been feeding the children. Erin said that during that conversation, Simon had turned to her and said, "Powdered mushrooms, is that what you used to kill my parents?" Erin says that when Simon said that, she'd panicked. She had thought, crikey, he thinks I've murdered them. Social services were by then involved. They were talking about what to do with the children. And Erin says she panicked, and in that panic decided to dispose of the food dehydrator. It was silly, it was a terrible mistake, but that's kind of what she did. Now, Simon Patterson denied that any such conversation had taken place. His evidence was that it hadn't. And it was for the jury to decide who was telling the truth. But even if that conversation had happened, it seemed a bit...
Yeah, I wonder who was telling the truth. Could it be Erin, the serial liar, or would it be Simon? You know, it's a no-brainer, isn't it?
To my mind, sitting in court, it seemed very suspicious. So when the police went to the tip, they retrieved the food dehydrator and they took it for forensic analysis. And when they needed to be sure that it wasn't someone else's dehydrator, of course, that had just coincidentally been dumped there. But they found on it a number of fingerprints, and those fingerprints were found to belong to Erin Patterson.
Surprise,
and then when
surprise.
they subjected the food dehydrator to further analysis, they found death cap mushroom toxins on the shelves. I felt, sitting in court, that this was another really compelling piece of evidence, and it looks like the jury agreed. It's obviously a very unusual case, a very strange way to murder people, but adding to the surreal nature of this trial was the fact, although the eyes of the world were on court.
Yeah, very strange case. I think they're going to add this to the Cluedo. I'm going to make a Cluedo board, you know, like with a special thing for Erin, you know, on the patio, by what do they call, by Scudder the Nutter on the patio with the death cap mushrooms or with the beef Wellington, going to add it to the Cluedo board. Gosh, not many people. I mean, there have been some, I know a case of someone who used poisoned eye drops to kill somebody. And quite often people use antifreeze, don't they, to poison people. There's probably been, but the thing is, poisoning, I reckon poisoning is probably the most likely to get undetected, because when you poison someone, and their organs fail or whatever, it'd be difficult, unless there's a reason why the hospital are looking for, foul play. I think you've got more chance of getting, obviously someone walks into a hospital with a bullet hole, or a bullet injury, it's obvious someone shot them or if they're stabbed. But poison is harder to detect. So she thought she was so clever.
There were 30 or 40 journalists there every single day, and lots of TV crews loitering outside. The trial wasn't happening in some big metropolitan court in Melbourne. It was, in fact, happening instead in a tiny little mining town near to Erin's home called Morwell. Erin had specifically asked to have her case heard locally. I think she felt that maybe a kind of jury made up of country people, local people, might be more inclined to believe her. And perhaps she also thought that if she is going to go to prison for 30 or 40 years...
That's why I think she sort of came to me, it was like an epiphany. She chose to do the trial in Morwell because it was full of people like Don, Gail, Heather and Ian, who she thought she could just hoodwinkle because she's so superior and so intelligent. And she thought she had more chance of hoodwinking them than she would have with a more sophisticated jury in Victoria or wherever, Melbourne, where the Supreme Court is. That's exactly why I think she did it. She thinks she's so superior to so many people.
Maybe this would be a sort of last chance to be in the kind of community that she lived in. It meant that the trial was heard in a really small room. There was room for only kind of 30 or 40 people in there, seats for 4 journalists at any one time. We all had to take part in a ballot to be in the room. Lots of locals were queuing up from dawn to be in there as well. It was quite compelling. At the start of the trial, the judge had to tell the jurors, look, you're probably going to end up bumping into lawyers, barristers, over the next 6 to 8 weeks. As you pop out for lunch, you might see members of the press, you might see people who are in court. Don't talk to them, and they're not going to talk to you, but don't think it's because they're being rude. That's just the rules. That's how a trial is conducted. You, the jurors, have to just reach your decision based on the evidence you've heard in court. This was a case where there was no one piece of what I'd say is kind of killer evidence. There was no one item that definitively proved Erin Patterson's guilt, but there were lots of little things. Yeah. And added together, it was like a sort of jigsaw. When you put all the pieces together, you get a clear picture. And in my mind, she is clearly a very clever, calculating woman and clearly a murderer. I think what sealed it for me really was seeing her on the stand. In any trial, the prosecution goes first. You hear their evidence. It took several weeks. And then it came time for the defence's evidence. And I was kind of thinking, well, what is the defense case? How can she explain lying about having cancer? How does she explain buying a food dehydrator, going to those big places where...
Yeah, and I agree completely with him. But the other thing is, I think once it was clear that it was only her who was giving evidence, and over 3 days, where were her experts to back up what she was saying? Where were her character witnesses? Where were people speaking on her behalf? There wasn't any. When you take over 50 witnesses for the prosecution and just one, the actual perpetrator for the defence, you realise there is no defence. No defence whatsoever.
the mushrooms were growing, looking them up on the iNaturalist website, drying out the mushrooms, making individual beef Wellingtons rather than one big one. What about, her not getting as sick as her guests? How is she going to explain all of that? And I eventually realized that really the only person who could speak to any parts of her case was Erin herself, and therefore that it was going to be inevitable that she would have to go into the witness box. And I think she spent 8 or 9 days there. The first sort of 3 or 4 of them saw her being kind of cross-examined by her counsel, Colin Mandy, for the defence. She looked quite comfortable. In fact, she came across quite well. But as soon as the prosecutor, Nanette Rogers, got her on the stand and started really kind of picking apart some of the things she said, interrogating her, asking her to explain things that didn't quite add up, we saw Erin sort of being caught up in I suppose what I'd call a web of lies. She had to admit that she'd lied to her family about having cancer. She had to admit that she'd lied to the police about the food dehydrator, that she'd secretly tried to dump it. She had to admit that there was something didn't quite add up about the Asian supermarket. And eventually she came across really as someone who was just a bit too shifty. And when it emerged that she'd also lied about gastric band surgery and that the clinic she said she was going to for the surgery just didn't do that kind of thing, at that point, I think something broke in the jury and you saw them exhaling quite deeply. And I thought at that point her goose was probably cooked. And so it proved. Now you've heard all the most important pieces of evidence, and perhaps you understand why the jury found Erin Patterson guilty. If you'd like to...
Oh, most definitely understand why they found her guilty. And yeah, exactly. Although the judge was saying to people, she's not on trial for lying, but what point does it come to? What point does it come to when you think, how many lies can someone tell before you start not believing anything that they say? It's just... No, she wasn't on trial for being a liar, but she never stopped lying. And she's expecting people to believe her about the later things she said, and obviously she couldn't be believed. But anyway, she's guilty. She's been found guilty. I just wanted to show you that. I thought it was good. I thought it was a good summary of Erin. I mean, we've got sentencing to come. Also, as I say, we'll be doing a video with these myths about Erin, like that she's intelligent. That's a myth. That she's a good mother. She's not a good mother. That she's a good cook. She's not a good cook. All those things that people are saying about her, it's just not true. So we're going to talk about that on another day. Okay, I've got to go now. Go and get some lunch. I've got some classes later, some Spanish classes. Thank you for caring about Ozzy. Thank you for caring about the football. I'm looking forward to the football tonight. Thank you for caring, of course, about Erin's victims. Now, later on today, or in America, which is in the morning, of course, we're going to have the Brian Kohberger sentencing. There'll be witness impact statements, etc. So we'll see. But yeah. Okay. I'm going to love you and leave you, as they say. I'm going to go and get some lunch. I hope you're all well. Thank you for watching. Or let me put my banner on. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you really soon in the next video, which will probably be tomorrow morning now. But until I see you again, take care, and may your God, oh gosh, I'm knocking things over, and may your God go with you. Thank you.